Good morning again, and I realized I might not have said my name when I spoke earlier, so I'm going to introduce myself again and just say I'm Reverend Natasha Eckholm, a staff minister here at Eckholm Center for Spiritual Living. And again, my joy and pleasure to welcome you here this morning, all of you here in the sanctuary. Oh, that's so sweet. And all of you joining us online from some really cool looking places, wherever those might be. Okay, so we always start out kind of checking in a little bit on all of our different themes. As you know, our theme for this year has been this idea of rising higher and growing deeper, which is a metaphor for stretching, for expanding our spiritual awareness and consciousness and ability to use spiritual tools to help us create the lives that we want to live. And our monthly theme, and I have to admit, I was this last week old when I learned this term, glow up. I had never heard that term before. And I have to admit, for a moment, I was like, what the heck? What is glow up? But I have learned that glow up is actually a term used in positive psychology about positive personal transformation. So indeed, we are all gathered here today, right, to engage in glowing up. So something new I learned. But certainly not the idea underlying the term glow up, because that is absolutely what science of mind is about. It is about supporting each and every one of us in our own individual spiritual journey to learn positive principles that can help us expand our own personal spiritual understanding and also support each other in expanding our collective spiritual understanding, because we do not live as individuals, right? We live collectively on this planet, on that planet, right? That's our home, right? We live on this little planet floating around, as Carl Sagan once called it, the pale blue dot, right? As he, based on a photograph that was taken by one of the exploring spacecraft. We live on this little blue dot, and we experience this, we have kind of an ambivalent relationship with this blue dot, don't we? On one hand, as Jody shared with us, right, it is, we know, in our teaching, it is God. Because everything is God. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. So, one of the things that we're recognizing this month, and in particular in relation to tomorrow, is that it is Indigenous Peoples Day tomorrow. And some of us might have known that day as Columbus Day, right? Many of us grew up with the holiday, Columbus Day, a day that recognized or commemorated maybe the idea that Christopher Columbus discovered the New World. And in recent years, there's been a movement to address the fact that in fact there were already people here when Columbus arrived, right? All the indigenous peoples of the Americas. And in honor of what is now being called by many Indigenous Peoples Day, we have an opportunity to honor the teachings of many indigenous peoples, which includes a very deep reverence for the earth. So we're going to talk about this idea of our oneness with the earth and our opportunity to honor the earth and to honor ourselves collectively as being part of that. So some of you may be familiar with Chief Seattle. Have anybody ever heard of him? Yeah, he's pretty well known among some. He was a leader of the Duwamish and Suquamish Coast Salish people. He lived in the 19th century. He was actually born at the very end of the 18th century. And he lived in what we now call Washington State, and in fact the city of Seattle is named for him. Although, as I understand it, his indigenous name in their language isn't pronounced exactly that way. I'm not even going to pretend to try to pronounce it as they did, but it got kind of transliterated to Seattle. So that's what we know the city of Seattle is. So this is a statement that he made as part of a longer comment at the time that there was a kind of sale or transfer of land happening. He said, "Every part of the earth is sacred to my people. Every shining pine needle, every sandy shore, every mist in the dark woods, every meadow, every humming insect. All are holy in the memory and experience of my people. We love this earth as a newborn loves its mother's heartbeat. So if we sell you our land, love it as we have loved it. Care for it as we have cared for it. Hold in your mind the memory of the land as it is when you receive it. Preserve the land for all children and love it as God loves us. As we are part of the land, you too are part of the land. The earth is precious to us. It is also precious to you. One thing we know, there is only one God. No man, be he red man or white man, can be apart. We are all brothers, after all. He made that statement in 1854, nearly 200 years ago. All right. As I think about this statement, that we are part of the land, that there is only one God, that we are all brothers, this reminds me of the first of our spiritual principles in the teaching of religious science. It is this: we believe in God, the living Spirit Almighty, one indestructible, absolute, and self-existent cause. This one manifests itself in and through all creation, but is not absorbed by its creation. The manifest universe is the body of God. It is the logical and necessary outcome of the infinite self-knowingness of God. This is a very long-winded way of saying God is all there is, right? And that we are God, and that everything that we experience and see, everything in the manifest universe, and that is us, and the earth, and everything around us, that is all God, right? And that it is, in fact, a necessary outcome of the infinite self-knowingness of God, which is to say, the wisdom that is God, the intelligence that is God, that is what expresses itself in us, as us, and through us. And not only are we one with the earth, our home, our planet, we are one with the universe, and not only metaphysically, but literally. As Carl Sagan, the astronomer, once said, the cosmos is within us. We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the universe to know itself. This statement blows my mind every time I read it, right? But it's the reality that the carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen that form our bodies came out of exploding stars eons ago. Everything in the universe is connected and recycled and reprocessed, and that is something happening all the time. So this idea that there is time, right? Something happened millions of years ago, or something is only happening now. We perceive it that way. That's our human experience. But the reality is something different, right? Because all of those atoms, all of those substances are in us right now. So they're still in existence. They're still moving forward. So you're getting kind of a National Geographic tour this morning. There are not going to be any words on these screens. I'm just sharing images today that I find beautiful, and I hope you will too, because that's part of, in my experience, connecting with the earth. So just to share with you what this is the sunrise off the Maine coast from Acadia National Park, which is the furthest eastmost point where you can see the sunrise. And Wendell and I were there a few years back and got to join 200 or 300 folks who, like us, had the great idea of let's go and see the sunrise on the Maine coast. But isn't it beautiful? Mm-hmm. So we experience Earth as a source of abundance. It is a place that allows us to grow and evolve and thrive. And following this example that was set by, as Chief Seattle described it, right? The teachings of so many indigenous people, we have the opportunity today and every day to honor our relationship with the earth. In the Science of Mind textbook, Ernest Holmes writes, the combined intelligence of humanity could not create the life of a plant. Yet the intelligence in the creative soil of the earth will produce as many for us as we ask when we plant the seed of that which we wish to have created. Plants are a beautiful example of divine design, as well as a very powerful metaphor. We experience our individual growth when we tend to the soil of our minds with the same loving care as tending the earth. Right? I think I've had the realization from time to time, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the challenge or problem of taking things for granted. For many years, my plants really lived by benign neglect. If they could survive my occasionally remembering to water them, they were winners. And what I hadn't really thought about was that I kind of treated myself that way too. You know, I mean, you're busy in life, you're just not really paying a whole lot of attention to things that might need tending, right? Because you'll get to it, it's on your list, but usually sort of kind of gets down to the bottom because there's so many other things that you got to make sure get done, right? You got to go to work, you got to pay your bills, you got to make sure the dishes are washed and your laundry is done, and you know, any bunch of things. But are you tending that self? Are you tending that holiness in you to create what you want to create, right? So we experience our individual growth when we tend the soil of our minds with the same loving care as tending plants. So I commend all of you here this morning. You're tending the soil of your mind this morning, as is everyone joining us. And that's a powerful thing. So I commend you for caring for yourself that way. So what does it mean to connect with nature? What kind of issues or processes are we talking about? Well, the first one, as I've said, is not to take it for granted, right? To wake up to that. Because it's so easy not to be awake in the world, right? It takes work sometimes, right? Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote this. He said, "To speak truly, few adult persons can see nature. Most persons do not see the sun. At least they have a very superficial seeing. The sun illuminates only the eye of man, but it shines into the eye and the heart of the child. The lover of nature is he whose inward and outward senses still truly adjusted to each other, who has retained the spirit of infancy even in the era of manhood. His intercourse with heaven and earth becomes part of his daily food. In the presence of nature, a wild delight runs through the man in spite of real sorrows." Has anyone here ever felt that wild delight when you're outside in nature? Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you feel that power of life, right, expressing itself. You know, whether it is in a beautiful coast like this as the sun rises, the sunset that we experience here on the West Coast, all the other ways we experience nature. And what I love especially about this is that idea of that childlike appreciation, right? Again, releasing sort of all of that adult busyness and blindness that we acquire for perfectly understandable reasons, but that as children, we haven't learned yet that we're supposed to be ignoring it, right? We're still appreciating that. So since Emerson wrote those words in 1857, we've begun waking up to our responsibility to care for the earth, as well as waking up to our responsibilities to care for each other. One of those is by addressing the legacies, right, of the physical and cultural genocide of Native peoples. And again, that's sort of coming back to this reference point of talking about tomorrow as Indigenous Peoples Day. We know that the cultural traditions of many Indigenous peoples center on honoring the earth. Black Elk was another famous Native leader once said, "The Holy Land is everywhere," right? The Holy Land is not somewhere you travel off to. The Holy Land is right here, where we are. So I wanted to share something with you that I imagine that many people have experienced. So when I was a kid, I lived in Massachusetts, and there was a lilac hedge in between my house and the house next door, and it was double row of lilacs, and you could stand inside the hedge and be surrounded by lilacs, by the fragrance of lilacs, by that very special green that is lilacs, if you know that flower. And I don't know, around the time I was 7 or 8 years old, I had an experience of God. And I didn't know that that's what it was at that point. I just had this very intense and profound experience where I felt sort of uplifted, otherworldly. I had no language for it. I did not grow up in a religious or spiritual household, but it was very profound. It did not leave me. And in later years, I had some other experiences, always outside, always in nature, but I realized as I grew older what that was, and that it was something important, and that it was something special, and that it was something that anyone could experience, right? But you had to be open to it. So whenever you're outside, I want to invite you to remember to take a deep breath in and to release it and just intentionally say, I am open. I am open to this connection. Because this is part of the nature of how we experience things, is the necessity of intentionality, right? How do we do that? So first we have to wake up, and then we have to recognize that really every experience we have is sacred, even if it doesn't always look like it, right when we're having it. Has anyone ever had that experience where you think, why am I going through this? Why is this happening to me? Yeah? Yeah. Right. But our spiritual growth has to come with recognizing the divinity of all life. This idea that every step that we take is a step on holy land. Many of us, if not most of us, are so focused on those to-do lists and responsibilities that we forget that every experience is sacred. And especially when we're in survival mode, right? Whatever it is that may be going on, it's even more difficult to recognize that spiritual nature of life. But despite all these challenges, we don't have to look very far to connect with it. The sun rises and sets without fail. Plants burst through the ground, even through sidewalks. The natural world is always proof that we are designed to break through the toughest obstacles. Another favorite place, the Redwoods in Northern California. And for any of you who have ever been able to visit it, even just the smell, right? The fragrance of the redwoods is so powerful and uplifting. I recently attended a book fair at USD, and I heard a presentation by a religious scholar there. Her name is Bahar Davari. And she's written a book called Eco-Theology and Love, where she explores the poetry of a Persian poet whose name is Sohrab Sapari. Not a poet I had ever heard of. He's a 20th century Persian poet. He died in the 1980s. But he was deeply influenced by the spiritual traditions of peoples around the world. And he wrote a lot about the human connection with nature and its importance. And he understood it as being very important, not only for us individually, but also how we connect with each other in this collective experience. He saw the world as a mystery that humbles us, and I really appreciated that idea. I feel like I'm always walking around in a mystery, and not in a bad way, like, oh my God, I don't understand, but in the sense of what is there to learn next? I love that idea. Here is something he wrote. I have a God who is nearby, under these violets, at the foot of that towering cypress, on the awareness of water, on the secret code of the plant. Just take those words in. I'm going to read them one more time. I have a God who is nearby, under these violets, at the foot of that towering cypress, on the awareness of water, on the secret code of the plant. I think that so beautifully expresses the immanent quality of the divine, its presence within all of nature, inside us, right? It is right there at the foot of the cypress. It is right there under the violets. And that's one of the really powerful and curious tensions of our connection with the divine. It is immanent, it is in us, and it is also transcendent, right? It is beyond. Sometimes we talk about that transcendent experience in the metaphor of the ocean, right? The ocean is the immensity of God. We are a drop, right? We are the immanent. God is the transcendent. So when we open our eyes to the truth that the Holy Land is everywhere, then we can use our senses and our imagination to both honor the earth and give it the reverence it deserves. So this is fall foliage in Massachusetts. Yeah. I will say this is one thing that San Diego is missing. We don't have this kind of fall foliage, but it is truly so breathtaking. Right? So when we're ready for deepening that personal awareness, for waking up, we can look to plants, right? We can look to trees, we can look to leaves for inspiration. Because our minds operate in the same way as the soil, right? As we heard Holmes talk about. And when we plant the experiences that we desire, pull the weeds of fear from our thoughts, water our minds with affirmations, and feel the sunshine of spiritual connection, our dreams can take root and bear healthy fruit. For those of us struggling to survive sometimes, right, being out in nature that looks like this, whether it's in the lilac hedge, whether it's at the redwoods, whether it's here in the midst of the foliage, is a way to ground ourselves, to connect to our senses, right? You might have noticed we're sort of doing a seasonal thing here. So, a place many of us recognize, Yosemite in winter, right? So why does this matter, right? Why does honoring the earth, why does recognizing our fundamental connection to the earth matter? I think there are a couple of important reasons. One, we've been talking about, the spiritual dimension, right? From a spiritual standpoint, our human journey is to become aware of who and what we really are as expressions of the divine, living in this manifest universe that is the body of God. And the more that we connect with that immanent divine, which is so fully present in nature, on the earth around us, the more that we develop our spiritual understanding and connect with the transcendent divine in which we are immersed. And the more that we cultivate this awareness, the more that we cultivate this consciousness, the greater our ability to use spiritual tools to really more fully express ourselves as individuals. From a practical standpoint, we see all around us that change is occurring on our planet and in our ecosystems. And though there is debate about the causes and what to do about it, there is a lot of evidence that our choices and our actions, how we care for or don't care for our planet, can make a difference for our short-term and long-term future. This is reality, right? I believe that we are all responsible, both individually and collectively, for thinking about what we can do to take care of the earth, to honor it, and to protect it and preserve it for our children and their children. I think we are called to do that, right? So what lessons can we take from the earth and nature itself to help heal ourselves? There's a book I want to invite you to look at. We're not going to go into it today, but it's called Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teaching of Plants. It's by an indigenous botanist. Her name, she's of the Potawatomi people. Her name is Robin Wall Kimmerer. And she has brought together science and indigenous knowledge in a very powerful way. And one thing she tells us is that the world has a way of guiding your steps. And this is such a powerful idea, and I have come to appreciate it more and more in my own life, is that when things show up, right, we have a choice. That's the world guiding us. We can pay attention or we can not pay attention. But the more that we pay attention, the more opportunities we have to really bring our own gifts forward and to support each other in really amazing and powerful ways. So, we've come all the way across to the other coast. This is the sunset at La Jolla Shores. Reverend Alice Reed is a senior minister in our movement, and she recently wrote a spiritual mind treatment this past week. And in it she quoted Ernest Holmes, who said this. He says, "The intellect brings us to the threshold. Something else lifts us over into spiritual knowing." The intellect brings us to the threshold, but something else lifts us over into spiritual knowing. So we've talked a lot in the last few minutes about the intellect, about understanding, about ideas, right? But what do we do to help lift ourselves over, right? So here's the invitation. This week, and you can keep it going too, but this week, to put intellect aside and engage your senses. Engage your sense of the divine as immanent in the earth, like the Sephardi poem that I read earlier. Take the time to engage the beauty and sacredness of divine creation all around you. So, how do we do this? Take a walk every day, outside, not on a treadmill, outside. Stand on the earth and ground yourself. We know that there is a magnetic vibration in the earth, and if we take our shoes off and stand on the earth, we can feel it in our bodies. Our bodies will ground with that. Listen to birdsong or insects humming, right? Or the sound of the wind, right? So we're talking about how we feel things, right? How we move, how they sound. Look at the stars and the moon. Or if it's cloudy, the clouds, right? Use your vision. Breathe in and think about what you are smelling. The fragrance of the rain, the smell of the wet dew on the grass when you get up in the morning, the smell of flowers, the smell of the salt tang in the air when you're walking at the beach. We have these amazing senses, and again, so easy not to really be paying any attention to what they are telling us, but they are engaging us with that amazing nature, that amazing planet, this place that is our home, if we will choose to pay attention to it. Here's another poem by Sapardi. He says, "I hear the sound of the breath of the garden and the sound of darkness as it falls from a leaf, and the sound of the cough of light from behind a tree, and the sneezing of water from every rupture in the rock." And when you have connected with this immanent divine, I want to invite you to connect with the transcendent, to allow yourself to be lifted, as Ernest Holmes said, into that spiritual knowing. And this is the way the world has of guiding our steps. So I want to conclude this morning with something I think is so beautiful, the Northern Lights. This is my aspirational trip. The other images are all places I've been to. This is the one that I look forward to experiencing, right? The Northern Lights. So I want to invite you to stand and join me in this affirmation this morning. And we're going to do it that threefold way, softly, loudly, claiming. Today I am one with Holy Earth. Today I am one with Holy Earth. Today I am one with Holy Earth. Namaste.